Okay. And here we are. We are live. It's Gordon Causey, as always. And as almost always, 99% of the time, here's Candy the Wonder Pup pawing all over me because she wants her TREAT. No point spelling it. She knows what she's getting. And Monarchy has already showed up. How you doing, sir? Saying good evening to everyone. Anyone and everyone who shows up. Myself, good evening to you as well, Anna Monarchy. All right. Yes. Okay. Let's get Candy taken care of. Danny F.E. is here. All right. Shake a paw. Lay down. Speak. 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 Come on. Give me a good one. She was in better voice earlier this evening. There she is. Candy has gotten her treat. She's taken care of. Appreciate everyone who's recently subscribed to the channel. And if you're new and intrigued a little bit by the Georgia Guidestones, I invite you to join the community, join the channel, sign up, subscribe, hit the like button, that kind of thing. I'm an old 58-year-old guy who is injecting his voice into the public discourse, talking about the things that are rattling around in my brain. And being a 58-year-old evangelical Christian, male, white, straight Christian, all these tics are what get you canceled in today's culture, and your voice isn't allowed to be part of the public discourse. Thankfully, with YouTube, provided you stay within certain narrow parameters and don't express, don't commit thought crime, which I've done a number of times. Apparently, my station has been subject to a number of my videos have been taken down. I've been given 1 week and 2 week holidays because of what I deem to be thought crime. Daring to give voice to unacceptable views or whatever the case. I've got Danny. Danny says he's got his ticket and his coffee, and that he himself has gone deep into the Georgia Guidestone rabbit hole for a while. So I assume, it's kind of, they got blown up in July of 2022. So over 2 years ago, this monolithic structure in Elberton, Georgia, was seriously damaged. Someone drove up in some kind of sedan, took a bomb, took explosives, placed it at the Guidestones, drove away, and then a massive explosion took place. One of the 4 pillars. I'm going to show you a video that show what the Guidestones looked like. What I find curious is so many people today aren't even aware that these things existed. They were shrouded in mystery for the longest time. They were built in 1979, 1980. I think they were completed in 1980. From what I've read, there was a kind of a public unveiling ceremony involving about 300 people, but it didn't get a lot of coverage. And, it's not like it was a tourist site. It became something of a tourist site, similar to, say, Roswell, New Mexico, the famous U.S. Air Force Base, and, kind of a conspiracy theorist tourist attraction in a way, but nothing that ever got promotion or anything. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I'm going to show one video. There are countless out there. You can find many of them here on YouTube. Let's see if my screen is sharing. With it sharing at times. Okay, there it is. Let's do the full screen. Down the right hand side, before I went full screen, there are a lot of videos out there on it, but let's just watch this one.
The Georgia Guidestones. These granite monoliths mysteriously appeared about 40 years ago. And if you're thinking aliens or a cult or even the 10 Commandments, well, you're not the only one. Just ask this guy. this and look through it. Ball of energy comes through that sucker, man. Things at this southern Stonehenge are about to get totally weird. These granite slabs outside of Atlanta, and no one knows exactly what they're doing here.
In future generations, they'll wonder, who put those stones there? Why did they put those stones there?
Hudson Cohn was here from the beginning, 1979. He took these photos as the Guidestones went up, 19 feet high, 250,000 pounds, and built to withstand an earthquake. The 4 slabs of granite each have 10 guiding principles of truth and harmony. They're inscribed in English, Russian, Chinese, Arabic. The list of languages goes on. But what does it all mean?
I've had people, some say it was some kind of Satan worship shrine and it ought to be torn down. And I've had others say it was the holiest spot on earth, that the Holy Grail was buried under there. Some people think it's a beacon to UFOs.
Hudson is one of the only people to meet the man who knows the true meaning. His name is R.C. Christian, and he paid for this all to be built. And wouldn't you know it, R.C. Christian is a fake name.
And he was very concerned about the environment.
Do you think
I'm not saying he couldn't be alive, but he'd been off.
Christian wanted this? Not even Wayne Mullinax, who sold 5 acres of his cow pasture to make space for the stones.
My house from here is about 600, maybe 700 feet down there, and we didn't have a problem unless somebody was going to come sacrifice one of my cows. Then I would have had a problem.
Did that happen?
No, it did not, but I did get nervous several times.
Mostly what's happened is a constant granite country. That's what this region is known for.
We do headstones and things of that nature, monuments. We do war memorials and things like that, but this really is one of the largest.
The Guidestones bring about 10,000 people a year to a town with a population of only about 4,500.
People all the way from Australia and China.
With all the tourism, is it possible that R.C. Christian was someone from Alberton that simply wanted to promote the area?
I'm thinking probably not, just because there was no marketing done really after the Guidestones were erected. Of this nature, then you're going to market that, right? You're going to tell everyone.
One of R.C. Christian's conditions was that there'd be no tourist attractions on the land, no t-shirt shops or crystal necklace stands, but there's no stopping the cosmic curious and the theories they bring with them. A buried time capsule.
There's some things you just don't tell everything.
Do you think it's there?
Let's just say I'm not going to answer that.
What's supposed to be in it?
Well, a lot of times there's capsules in different places with different things in it. And that could be the true identity to the group that Mr. Christian represents.
Maybe the time capsule's buried somewhere but not there.
I didn't say that.
That's just my
I
speculation.
didn't say that.
Whatever the reason, these slabs are built strong enough to stand on this earth longer than any of us, leaving a future generation guessing.
It's like looking at a painting. You can see the painting, but you don't know what the painter really meant. Whatever it means to you is what it means. There's no right or wrong.
And that's the end. So I put that out there for edification if anyone's curious. Anyone who heard of these Georgia Guidestones. And they have a wiki page like everything else in the world today. And on the Wikipedia page that you saw during that video, it spoke of the fact that there were 10 guiding principles, or some have referred to them as 10 commandments for a post-apocalyptic age. And I put it up here. The inscriptions are these 10 guiding principles, and these were written into 8 languages. You see there are 4 stones set off against each other, and on each side of those stones, these guiding principles were written in 8 different languages, one for each side of those 4 outer stones facing in on each other. English, Chinese, Arabic, I forget the exact languages, but there were 8. And in the English rendering, this is what they said. The first guiding principle, number 1, was to maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Number 2 was to guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity, which Anyone who knows what eugenics is will recognize that. Guiding reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. That's what you do with horses, with cows, with animals. And so they're taking the idea of animal breeding and extending it to the human realm. You know, if a horse or a cattle or, you know, animals that are bred, selectively bred, any horse that comes along with less than desirable traits would be gelded so that it couldn't reproduce, sterilized, so that, you know, the poor genetic quality wouldn't be passed on. It's not the way human reproduction has ever been, although there have been individuals, there have been countries, there have been societies that have tried it. Unite humanity with a living new language. Let's all have one language. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. You know, as a professing Christian, this to me speaks directly to the fall of mankind when Eve partook of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and now, you know, it was humanity thinking that they could supplant God, that we can be the masters of our own world, and we can act as the creator and not the creation. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Balance personal rights with social duties. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. What's the infinite? And be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. And anyone who's been driving through Canada and goes from a major populated center and then drives for hours through wilderness, through unpopulated, will know that Canada, the United States, most of the world has tons of room for nature, huge amount of room for nature. But I'm going to stop sharing. The two principal guiding principles that I want to talk about are number 1 and number 2. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature, guide reproduction wisely. I'm just going to read up. Danny is cautioning me to be careful because the Guidestones talk about depop, and you know, we have 8+ billion people on the planet now. I don't know what the population of the planet was in 1980 when those Guidestones were completed. I'm guessing probably 5 to 6 billion, somewhere in that nature. We've continued to climb. I'm just reading on. Anna Monarchy is writing that it was also written in cuneiform, he believes. The way I understand it, 8 of the languages were modern. So on each of those concentric stones, those 4 stones, you know, English, French, German, Arabic, I don't know, the 8 modern languages. And then on the capstone and perhaps down the other side, they were also inscribed in 4 ancient languages, perhaps Sumerian, Sanskrit, cuneiform, perhaps. I don't know what the 4 ancient languages are. It's probably here in the wiki page. Let's see what the languages are. Okay. English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, traditional Chinese, and Russian. Those are the modern languages. And they were written in also 4 ancient languages, but I'm not finding the ancient languages on the wiki page. Okay. Around the edges of the square were written translations to 4 ancient languages, 1 per edge, starting from the top and proceeding clockwise. They were Babylonian, in cuneiform script, so you're right, Anunnaki, classical Greek, Sanskrit, and ancient Egyptian in hieroglyphics. And this gets touchy, dicey, because as Danny has warned me, but I'm not talking about depopulation. I'm talking about the Georgia Guidestones. And there are countless videos out there that show fully, what the 10 guiding principles are. And the first one being to maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Where are we? I'm just maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. But I want to actually wink, wink, nudge, nudge, leave the Georgia Guidestones alone for a second and just talk about, juxtapose the Guidestones with what's happening in our current world right now. And I've spoken about this before, but not in relation to the Georgia Guidestones. And it's just all the different things that are happening in the world. But the interesting aspect of it is that so much of what is happening in today's world seems to be fixated primarily on the Western developed world. It's not the globe, not the entire globe, it's on the Western developed world. When we talk about all the health, all the looming, we had the COVID era, starting in 2020. And now we have talk of increases in rhinoviruses, RSV, respiratory syncytial virus. There was in the summer, they had that in New England, in the New England states, Massachusetts and area. They actually brought in lockdowns, because evening time lockdowns, ending all outdoor activities at high schools and stuff because of Eastern equine encephalitis, a mosquito-borne illness, monkeypox, or mpox as it's being called now. And then we have, of course, we're told that on the horizon somewhere we should anticipate disease X coming. But these are this focus on viral pathogens and health scares is fixated, to my way of thinking, almost entirely on the Western world. Then we look at the wars that are taking place. We have a war going on between Russia and Ukraine, and it has the potential, and it is impacting the rest of the world now, because the United States has started supplying the Ukrainians with some form of ballistic missiles. They're called ATACMS. Kind of, I think they're akin to a cruise missile. I may be mistaken on that, but they are a long-range missile that travels at hypersonic speeds and can travel up to 300 kilometers and hit directly into Russian territory. The British as well are supplying a similar type ballistic missile, not quite the same range, but also enabling the Ukrainians to attack deep within Russian territory. And Russia has in turn said that now that you have NATO countries like the United States and Britain supplying Ukraine with these weapons that are being used to attack Russian soil, that this constitutes a red line. It represents an attack by NATO on Russian soil. It's similar in a fashion to the way that in that other major war between Israel and Iran, Israel is attacking Hezbollah, is attacking Hamas. They've been attacking the Houthis, but ultimately they've managed to, we now have exchanges taking place between Israel and Iran itself. So Israel has managed to go around. It's no longer dealing strictly with the proxies, Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas or Islamic Jihad or all these other groups in places like Iraq and Syria. Now there's direct involvement between Iran and Israel, with the potential to expand outward. So there's the war concern that, and I think this is a concern that's predominantly in the Western world, in NATO-style countries. Then you look at other aspects that we're worried about, things that are dominating the public discourse. One is certainly what I call the woke agenda, the woke agenda that is dividing Western civilization, which is, this idea that an individual can decide on their own what gender they are. They can ignore biological reality and get gender affirming surgery, which is weird when you consider that people say that genitalia doesn't determine a person's gender. So a penis isn't what makes a man, and a vagina isn't what makes a woman. So then how does removing a penis affirm gender if the penis doesn't confer gender? But this is something we fight over and argue over in our Western world. Another one to worry about is the weather. We're told to be that draconian measures are needed, and that we have to impoverish people today for future generations, because the climate is going to be unlivable in a short period of time. Justin Trudeau was just down in Rio de Janeiro and talking about the fact that we can't allow these short-term concerns about affordability, putting food on our kids' backs, putting food in our kids' mouths, or clothes on our kids' back, or putting a roof over our heads. We can't allow these short-term concerns to distract us from the big bad boogeyman of climate change. And then there have been cataclysmic weather events. I haven't heard of any in the developing world or in the third world, but I certainly know about what happened in Hawaii last year. I think it was Lanai, or whatever the name of that town was, where massive wildfires came in and people went to flee the town, and then the authorities blocked the road and told people to go back, and the only people who actually survived were those who drove around the roadblocks. We've had wildfires in, I think it wasn't Banff, trying to remember, the Jasper National Park in Alberta, and having these huge weather events. And we've had Elaine, or however you say that hurricane name, that hit the Carolinas, primarily North Carolina. And then we have the political situation. The United States has a new president, and that's a divisive. It's got everyone concerned. But the concerns seem to center largely on the Western developed world. And when we talk about the political situation, what happens in the U.S. impacts the rest of the world, because even though America may be on the decline, we're still living in the dying days of Pax Americana, American hegemony. Basically, there's the American empire. And while it is in decline, and some believe that Donald Trump taking office back will resurrect and restore the American empire to its former glory, making America great again. Will or won't that happen? Only time will tell. Let me catch up on what's being said. Amonarchy on the stone. So sort of like a Rosetta Stone. Yes, the Rosetta Stone is a famous stone from Egypt. I think it was discovered sometime in the 1800s, and it included an account that was written in ancient hieroglyphics, and then also in Greek, more modern Greek, and I think even in a third language. And it was what enabled Egyptologists to finally decipher Egyptian hieroglyphics, because they had the same account written in three different languages. And so they were able to discern it. And now, You've got 8 modern languages, 4 ancient languages. If anything survives of any of those languages, someone could go back and reverse engineer and figure out what the 10 messages were. And Danny has given me the population of the Earth, probably according to Google, but as good as any, 4.442, so just under 4.5 billion people in 1980 when the stones were erected. So it's nearly doubled since then. And everyone's saying good evening. Cryptomary saying, with respect to gender, the doctor got it wrong at birth. Danny's giving me the name of that city in Hawaii, Lahaina. And Cryptomary is saying that Trump will not be happy with BC, British Columbia. Why? Because they just elected an NDP government by the narrowest of margins. And Danny's expressing the opinion that these weather disasters that I've been enumerating, that they are man-made. I'm not saying that, not discounting it either. But the thing is, so much of this agenda that we're seeing played out is directed at the Western world, Canada, the United States, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, the Western developed world. And there are 8 billion, 8+ billion people living on the planet now. At least that's the number we're told. And if you look at Canada, the US, and Western Europe, Canada and the US, our combined population is probably pushing up somewhere near to 400 million. Europe, Western Europe, the population of Western Europe is somewhere in and around 200 million. And then if you add in Australia, New Zealand, and other countries that could fall into this, what I'll call the Western developed world, you might want to include Israel with that. The Western developed world, we're probably 700-800 billion. That's 7 point something billion of the world's planet is living is underdeveloped. They're second or third world countries. And it speaks to something I mentioned in my last video, Pareto distributions, which I read more on. And Pareto distributions hold that it's the 80-20 rule, not 70-30, 80%, 20%. And how 80% of the world's wealth is held by 20% of the world's population. It actually doesn't work out quite that way. It's not strictly 80-20. What it is it's you take the square root of the total, and they will have, if you're dealing with wealth, the square root of the total population will have 80% of the wealth. And if I type in, I'm not sure what the square root of, I checked it earlier, but I forget now what the square root of 8 billion is. I don't have a calculator. What is the square? The square root of 8 billion is actually less than, it's less than 100,000. It's 89,442. So 89,442.7191. If you multiply that number against itself, you will get up in around 8 billion. So what this Pareto distribution holds is that in today's world, 89,442 people have 20%, have 80% of the wealth. So less than 90,000 people out of 8 billion have control over 80% of the wealth. And this seems to be something that's built simply into the fabric of reality, into the fabric of creation. This idea that this 80-20 rule, that's more commonly expressed as the 80-20 rule. Cryptomeria is writing our quote unquote safe supply. Maybe he can end this insanity. We'll see. I mean, I think you're talking about Trump there. I know that I don't read everything just as as it's written, and you don't always type it just as I say it. But I think And I'm sorry for the disjointed fashion of this video. It's just that I've got to be careful, as Danny had admonished me near the beginning, because of what the stones speak to, that number one guiding principle. But if we look at the world's population, there's only 700 odd million of us, 800 million of us living in the Western developed world. And yet so much, when we talk about the health concerns, about war, about these gender battles, about threats to cybersecurity, about attacks on the internet, we look at the political situation, everything is fixated on the Western world. And that's ignoring 7+ billion of the world. And I think there's a reason for it. And I think there's a big reason for it. Why are you attacking the smallest part and not the biggest part? Remembering that number one guiding principle. And Danny's already hitting on it. Jesus is forever. Jesus is king. In the Western developed world, our society is built, whether you like it or not, and I like it, I love it, but our society, the Western developed world, we are blessed. That is why there are caravans of people storming, trying to get into the United States. That is why there were caravans coming across Europe, trying to get into the European Union countries. That is why in Canada we have the Roxham Road. We are a blessed region. We are the blessed part of this creation. We are blessed. We are not perfect. We are far from perfect. But if you ask anyone, would you rather live in rural Mexico or even downtown Mexico City? Would you rather live under a Chinese dictatorship or a dictatorship in Syria under Bashar al-Assad? Or would you rather live in sub-Saharan Africa? Would you rather live in remote northern India? Where would you rather live? And most people in the world will say they want to come and live in the Western developed world because we're blessed. Now, I know that the left wing will, those of a woke liberal mindset will say the reason that we are so blessed is because we have been exploiting sub-Saharan Africa and much of the continent of Africa and India and Haiti. Look at the Caribbean nations. Look at Dominican Republic, Haiti, Hispaniola. Look at South America and the exploitation that has gone on down there. And that is fair enough. That is a fair comment. But it also speaks to this Pareto distribution that seems to be built into the fabric of reality. It's simply our broken, fallen human nature leads to this. And it's merely a question of capacity. Had those alternative societies had the ability to exploit, would they have been altruistic and good? No, they would have done the same thing that we've done to them. And you'll have to, and when I say things have never been perfect, take a look at slavery, which ended. And the global slave trade, the African slave trade that took place between, basically it was something of a triangular slave trade between Africa, the Caribbean, and North America. And it also, was spilled over into Europe a bit, but those were the three primary destinations. It was this triangular trade route, slaves brought down into the Caribbean and also back up into North America. Then they'd sail back across, load up on more slaves, and rinse and repeat. That came to an end thanks to the abolitionist movement, which was a Christian movement. We're moving to, we aspire toward perfection, but we fall far short. Let's just read what's being written. Danny is saying that the U.S. must fall for the WEF's New World Order to take hold. Well, I don't think it's just the U.S. I think it's I somewhat refer to the Western world as the vanguard, as the tip of the spear, as fighting against this idea of Klaus Schwab's Great Reset, Fourth Industrial Revolution, this Agenda 2030, Agenda 2035. That the US is the main bulwark against it. The Western world is against it, but it's the US that's at the front of that vanguard. So I am going to absolutely 100% agree with you. But what will happen, I think the intention is, once in the eyes of the globalist mindset, this WEF Agenda 2030 Great Reset, this ideology, the idea behind it is to, once the Western world falls, and mainly what we have to do is we have to eliminate this, is because it's in this book, it's in these words, it's in scripture that we have found that we have created this world that is far superior to what it was 2,000 years ago when Jesus incarnated into this world. Laws were determined by the edict of the king. So it is written, so it shall be done. And whoever the king was, he would determine what the rules were and what the law was. There was no supreme good. The supreme good was the king. And often the king was looked to be, in the ancient world, the king would be thought of as a god. And so what the king says is divine proclamation. And I believe it is the ultimate goal and desire of those behind this agenda to reinstitute that type of system, that global system that existed in the days before Jesus Christ came incarnated into this world. And we want to eliminate all teaching, all biblical knowledge, all biblical understanding. And once you do that, then all manner of evil can be unleashed on this world. It's evil enough as it is, but this stymies those behind this agenda, behind this demonic satanic agenda. That this is standing in their way, and they need to eliminate it. There's no doubt in my mind during the COVID era, when churches were restricted from gathering, that you'll remember that in March, April of 2020, no more than stay in your house. Do not go outside. It is just too dangerous. And if you do gather outside, no more than 5 or no more than 10, a very small number of people gathering outside, standing 6 feet apart, and okay, but only that many. But then the George Floyd incident happened down, I forget whether it was, I think it was Milwaukee or Minneapolis, I forget where. It was an M anyway. The George Floyd incident happened, and then all of a sudden, the restrictions were lifted. Okay, you can now gather in huge numbers outside. You can gather in the hundreds and the thousands. Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford will join with you, and they'll stand shoulder to shoulder because we have to fight for racial equality. And the virus knows the difference between gathering for a worship service and gathering for social justice. Tim Stevens is a pastor from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and he was thrown into jail. Why? For doing exactly what they did during the George Floyd protests, gathering in large numbers in a park. I think there are about 100 people gathered in a park, in Ralph Klein Park in Calgary. And he was thrown into jail. Like, you go to Costco, you could have they allowed massive protest rallies for George Floyd, the BLM movement. But a church gathering? Oh, no, 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 not allowed. Throw that pastor in jail, stick him in a maximum security remand center because he's a threat to the safety. And so many people went along with it. And that's a scary notion. People were so, they couldn't see the contradiction. Well, why can we gather for George Floyd, but this Christian group can't gather to worship God, the creator of all things? Well, they're doing the best they can. Oh yeah, they're doing the best they can. They want to diminish this voice. And then what they can do is backfill the population in the Western world with people coming from parts of the world where this is not foundational teaching. Where running water is considered a luxury. Human rights, just give me enough to eat and I'm happy. And is that the type of world we want? The ultimate goal of this video is to tell you that there is a power, there is a force, there are, Danny has put it down many times, the quote that, we do not wage, this is not a battle of flesh and blood. This is principalities in the spiritual realm. There's a force of evil, there's a force of good. And humanity is the battleground. And every human being, we're all stained by original sin. We all have, I've heard it described as there are two dogs. There's a good dog and a bad dog in all of us, and it's all a question of which one do you feed? Do you feed the good dog? Do you feed the bad dog? I think there is, validity to that analogy. And I think that's actually a native North American First Nations saying. But irrespective, I think it's got a lot of validity to it. Scripture speaks to it too. We've got the capacity for good and for evil. And what leads us toward the good is by getting into relationship with the creator of all things through his son who went to the cross to reconcile us for a fallen, broken condition. Because we are fallen, we are broken, we are sinful, we are pulled towards evil. And this pulls us back. And that's why things have gotten so much better. That's why we don't have slavery anymore. Anyway, I'm just going to read up. Danny's writing, Trump wants to apparently send Tier 1 operations, Ranger, SEAL, Recon, Delta, against the cartels. It'll be amazing to see what's going to, we're still early on. It's called Agenda 2030 for a reason. And the Georgia Guidestones, getting back to that old monument, was erected in 1980. So this ideology, this mindset, this idea of humanistic, nature, paganistic nature worship, and and eugenics, guiding human reproduction, the way you guide the reproductive cycles of horses and cattle and dogs, and bring that to the human realm. This idea goes back even further than 1980, but things really started to get into high gear in 2020. Why all of a sudden in 2020? Look at that number one guiding principle. When those stones went up, according to Danny's searching, we were at 4.42 billion people back in 1980. Now we're over 8 billion. Is that the reason that things moved into high gear? Is that why we're seeing insanity in the world right now, where we're being told to be afraid of COVID, RSV, monkeypox, triple E, disease X, all these diseases everywhere? Is this why we're seeing all of a sudden wars blow up with the potential to, we're talking about the potential for nuclear warfare right now, because Russia has said that with NATO nations now supplying armaments that are being used to directly attack Russian soil, that this, crosses a red line, and that they are lowering their threshold for the use of nuclear armaments. What are we walking into? When we look at that war, it almost makes the gender debate and these culture wars seem inconsequential. But look, I'm talking right now over a digital platform, over YouTube. What happens if the internet goes down? What happens if we can't access our money? What if you can't fill up your car because the power system, the power grid goes down? Everything's regulated by the internet now. Everything's done digitally. And if all of a sudden, banks, we've all seen the situation where the stores say cash only because Interac is down and Visa and MasterCard are down, and you have to have cash. Strongly recommend everyone, in my opinion, that you're well served to have cash on hand. And then who knows, if our monetary system, something happens to it, you may want something more assets which are more hard and tangible. Things like food, gold and silver, and precious metals also come to mind, but you can't eat gold and silver. Let me read, Danny's giving that quote. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That's from one of Paul's letters. That's what we're dealing with in this world. Danny's writing, first it was Agenda 2020, then Agenda 2025, now Agenda 2030. And he's expressing the opinion that the reason is because we keep thwarting them and they are pissed. The one thing is, I look back, I'm something of a student of history. Not a historian. I don't have a PhD in history or anything like that nature. Call me an amateur historian if you like. But I look back at a time like the French Revolution. Now, did King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette and their court, did they want what happened during that French Revolution? Did they want to lose their heads? Did they want to be subject to Madame Guillotine? And did they want the complete overhaul of the Palace of Versailles, living the King Louis XVI? I think he gave himself the moniker of the Sun King. Did he envision, did he want that to happen? I don't think so. When Great Britain lost control over the American colonies, did they want that to happen? No. They wanted to maintain control over their colonial empire, but they lost it. And revolution is something I think that if you're in a position of power, you want to avoid. You want to avoid revolution. So the best way you do things incrementally. You don't want to do things too harshly, especially when you're so vastly outnumbered. I talked about the Pareto distribution. 90,000. That's according to Pareto distribution, written into the very fabric of reality. 90,000 people on the planet control 80% of the wealth of this planet. Probably 90,000 or so people on the planet probably own 80% of the real estate. Think of that. So over 7.99 billion people. We're sharing the 20%. We own 20% of the land. We own 20% of the Earth's resources, wealth. 80% is held by just 90-odd thousand people. That's Pareto distributions. And as I was pointing out the other day, it's ubiquitous in nature. That's the way it was discovered. Was this mathematician found that the peas in his garden, that 80% of the peas only came from 20% of the plants. And then he tried to cull out the ones that weren't producing. Here, okay, I'll get rid of those and I'll only have these. Well, then the same distribution came into effect. Then it was, of what was left, 80% of the peas were produced by just 20% of the plants. It's built into the fabric of reality. And I was mentioning it in relation to the story of Jesus when the woman went and anointed his head with an expensive ointment called nard, and the disciples rebuked her and they were clucking their tongues and saying that ointment, that anointing, that nard, it's expensive stuff. We could have used that money for the poor. And Jesus said, you will always have the poor with you. You will not always have me. She's done a beautiful thing. She's anointed me for burial. Jesus said, you're always going to have the poor with you. This inequity is always going to exist on this side of the veil during this earthly existence, this existence that is God created. There is a reckoning. There is justice. But we may not see it in this lifetime. And we have to trust in God that justice will be done. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Anyway, I'm going to read up. Danny's writing first, okay, and he's giving me the quote for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, and it's from Ephesians 6:12. That's Paul's letter to the church at Ephesus, known as Ephesians. I'm going to read it right out of my copy, just see if there's any difference, because there are different translations of the Bible. I think we all know that. 6:12. For we are not contending against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the world rulers of this present darkness, against the spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. And then you've quoted the next part as well. Therefore, take the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. And having done all to stand, stand therefore, having girded your loins with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the equipment of the gospel of peace. Besides all these, taking the shield of faith, with which you can quench all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. The word of the Lord, thanks be to God. Interesting, it said there, gird. I looked this up. Stand therefore, having girded your loins with truth. And I wondered, where do we get this gird your loins? It says that repeatedly, Old Testament, New Testament, gird your loins. And in the ancient world, when the Israelites would go into battle, they wore tunics. I don't have a tunic on, I've got a hoodie, but the tunic would go down below the knees. And what the warrior would do is the warrior, wearing his tunic, would take the tunic and it would be drawn through the legs, pulled up the back, wrapped around and tied so that the legs would be bare. And that was girding up your loins to free your legs so that you could go and fight in the battles. So when you saw someone doing this, it meant that they were preparing for battle. And I was just curious because there's so many instances in the Bible where it says, gird up your loins. I'm like, I thought, does that mean like, grab... People say grow a pair, or grab your manhood, like gird your loins. What is it talking about? Well, in a fashion, that's what it's saying. In a fashion, it's saying, man up, gird your loins, lift your tunic up, tie it off, and get ready and go into battle. Danny's also writing, spend some of your fiat currency to buy physical gold. I think there is some wisdom in that. I'm not going to, go full bore on buy gold. But the money that we hold in our wallets right now and in our bank accounts is what Danny describes. It is a fiat currency. What that means is there's nothing backing it up. There's no intrinsic value. It's worth the paper that it's printed on. There's no Fort Knox anymore. There's no gold reserve. The government of Canada is not holding hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars in physical hard assets to back up our currency. The currency is its notional value, its perceived value. And there are tons of websites and tons of videos out there on fiat currency and what it means. But basically, that's what it comes down to. It's like a share of Nortel stock, a company that never made a single dime in profit, but was trading at one time for around, I think got up around $140, $50 a share, even though they lost money all the time. The only way they were able to survive is every time the company needed money, they would just print more shares, sell them into the market, and get the capital. But the shares ultimately were only worth because there were people willing to pay $110, $20, $30, $40, $50 a share. So, and then eventually the house of cards collapsed, and everyone's like, well, are they ever going to make money? And nope, doesn't look like it. They're never going to make a dime in profit. And then the house of cards collapsed, and eventually, Nortel stock isn't even worth the paper that it's printed on anymore. So let me just read up the last bit. And Danny's reading from the King James Version, which actually I have no issue with whatsoever. And in reading that passage, the King James versus the English Standard Revised, they're very similar, just different word usage, different language, but the meaning is the same. He's tall. It's an imposing structure or an imposing edifice structure. Pick your word. So I'll leave you there. It wasn't the greatest video. I can't lay things out as directly as I would like to, because that number one guiding principle is, I think that's part of the agenda. The number one guiding principle on the old Georgia Guidestones. However, it seems somewhat incongruous that so much of the attack that's taking place that we can see is happening against what's a drop in the bucket, but we are the vanguard. We're the tip of the spear collectively. And it'll be guys like Bashar al-Assad in Syria, guys, the leaders of China, the leaders of so many of these dictatorial countries. Look at what Idi Amin did down in Uganda. They don't have the same issues in shackling up their populations, and in some cases even killing their own populations. Look at Idi Amin. Look at Stalin. Look at Mao in China. And look at the number of people they killed. Hitler, I think, is widely held to have been responsible for 15 to 20 million German citizens losing their lives. So he killed 15 to 20 million of his own people. Then we move to Stalin, and he's like 40 million. Twice as bad as Hitler was. Then go to Mao. And Mao, the number is even larger than Stalin. I think he's said to have been responsible for 60 to 80 million Chinese citizens being killed. When you run it, when you have that type of a system that exists in the old Soviet Union, classic Marxism, God is the opiate of the masses. Mao Zedong, also a communist. Karl Marx, God is the opiate of the masses. Well, give me the opiate of the masses, because it's also the opiate of the oppressed. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So I'll end it there. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and may the Lord grant you peace, and he will. And Anna liked the talk. Glad you did, sir. I found it a little unwieldy, but we'll see what I have to say in another night or two. Good night, all. God bless.